It's baffled scholars for 2 millennia. It is a puzzle made of multi-dimensional elements, an enigma with roots that reach back to the dawning of time, perhaps before. Daniel explained part of it. Ezekiel and Isaiah had glimpses into it. John saw it all for the time of the end. That time is now. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert on a journey that spans the course of history, from Eden to Mount Hermon, from Hermon to Babel, from Babel to Rome, from Rome to the cross, and from there to us. Biblical prophecy is coming true before your eyes, and to understand it, you must discern the times both then and now. It's time to unravel the threads of this all-encompassing prophetic paradox. It's time to unravel Revelation.
They are Rephaim, they will not arise. Welcome to Unraveling Revelation from Skywatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we are coming to you from Studio G2, I think, at home. One of the G studios here at the Gilbert
Call this
House.
one G1. This one is...
I like G Prime, first of all. It's one of our home studios, of course, and it worked out that way because we were doing the other things over at the main studio, so you get to enjoy all sorts of programming. We're really getting busy over there.
Yes, we are. But welcome to our home, and we appreciate you taking the time to watch us. You can find all of our archived shows in order from the very first program in the right-hand sidebar at our website, unravelingrevelation.tv. Unravelingrevelation.tv gets you that, plus the link to the information about our 2021 tour of Israel.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll tell you more about that after the break. But we've got some exciting stuff today. Boy, Isaiah is chock full of things that we don't really grasp until we begin to understand what he knew about the pagan world around him. And today, with Isaiah 26 and some, then jumping off to Ezekiel and the Psalms and some digging into the Hebrew, we're going to pull together some stuff that might take us another week or two to get through. It is fascinating.
That's typical of us, isn't it? But that's the thing. I mean, when the Lord says that every jot and tittle of his word would be fulfilled, it means every punctuation mark, every bit of it. And I think it even means those things hidden within the original language and the context in which it was written that he knew our modern readers would miss.
Absolutely.
He was giving us a hint. Yeah. Dig deeper.
There are things in Isaiah that only make sense when with the knowledge that has increased, a reference to the prophecy of Daniel, over the last 100 years, and really only the last 40 years since we began to understand, scholars began to understand the importance of the cult of the dead in the ancient Levant. The Amorites who surrounded ancient Israel venerated what they thought were their ancestors, really the demons, the demonic spirits that proceeded from the Nephilim destroyed in the flood. But we only recently have begun to understand that those references to the Rephaim spirits in the Bible have been concealed because it's only the last 40 years that we're beginning to realize those references, that Rephaim is a proper name and not a term that applies to the dead.
Exactly. It's often translated as the dead or the shades. The fact is that these were worshipped as ancestors, but they weren't ancestors at all. They were demons.
Yeah, and many of the practices of the pagans around ancient Israel, the Canaanites, the Amorites that had to be pushed out of the land by the Israelites after the Exodus during the conquest of Canaan, which lured the Israelites in. Because when Isaiah wrote in the 7th century and early 6th century BC, he was writing almost 800 years after Moses and the Israelites took the land. Joshua and the Israelites took the land, actually. So for 8 centuries, even though they had been told since the time of Moses, don't do this, they were still doing it. And in fact, we found, as we wrote in our book Veneration, that even the early Christian church in Rome had continued some of these practices, which is why some of the earliest Christian churches built after Constantine legalized the faith in the 4th century AD were built in the middle of cemeteries. So,
yes.
Including St. Peter's Basilica, which is part of the Vatican complex now.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it truly is.
It is. Well, shall we dig in?
Let's dig in. Isaiah chapter 26. In that day, and we have to stop and emphasize again, whenever you see that phrase in the Old Testament, in that day or on that day, that's a reference to the day of judgment, the day of the Lord, or the day of Yahweh. the prophesied future day when God pours out his judgment on an unrepentant world. In other words, that's Armageddon.
Yes.
That's when the final boom hits.
Yes. Well, let's go back to the end of 25 because there were no chapter divisions.
True.
So we get, God will rest on this mountain, and the country of Moab shall be trodden down as they tread the floor with wagons. And he shall spread forth his hands, even as he also brings down man to destroy him. And he shall bring low his pride in regard to the thing on which he has laid his hands. And he shall bring down the height of the refuge of the wall, and it shall come down even to the ground. This is God's judgment. And I was reading, by the way, in case you were wondering, from the Septuagint.
Okay. I wondered about that.
Yeah.
But yes, but even that section begins in verse 9 of Isaiah 25. It will be said on that day. So again, another reference to that day, the day of the Lord.
Exactly. The Lord is erasing the pagan society.
Right.
And we're trying to rebuild it right now.
Yes, America is not moving into an atheist world. Richard
Yeah.
Dawkins, I saw, was just disinvited from a speaking engagement at Trinity College in Dublin because he was, not because he's an atheist, but because he said mean things about Islam.
What?
It's not enough to be anti-Christian anymore. You have to be pro-pagan in this modern world. And I'm sorry if that offends anyone, but the truth of the matter is that Allah is not Yahweh. And so by definition, Islam is a pagan religion.
Yes, it is.
So Isaiah chapter 26. In that day, this song will be sung in the land of Judah. We have a strong city. He sets up salvation as walls and bulwarks. This is the thing that struck me this morning as I was reading and why I started getting really excited. Remember when we traveled to Israel and Messianic Rabbi Zev Porat, who will join us on our 2021 tour,
Yeah.
took us to the monument there at Shiloh, which remembers the prayer of Hannah,
Yes.
the mother of Samuel, who gave thanks for God being her salvation. Well, in Hebrew, salvation is Yeshua,
Exactly.
Jesus.
Which is one reason that the Jews are not taught
Yes,
that Yeshua is Messiah. They're taught that Jesus is called by, that the name that they give him, that they teach their students, is a bad word.
it's a pejorative, yes. So they don't understand that when they're saying Yeshua in the Old Testament, that they're actually saying the name of Messiah, which is tragic. But here, think about this now. We have a strong city. He sets up Yeshua as walls and bulwarks. Isn't that exciting? And the word city, as we mentioned before, in Hebrew is Ir, which in Aramaic means watchers.
Exactly.
We have a strong watcher.
Well, yes, could be.
Yeah, no, I think in this, it probably is
probably
city,
means city.
referring to Jerusalem, yes. We have a strong city. He sets up salvation as walls and bulwarks. Open the gates that the righteous nation that keeps faith may enter in. You keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you. Trust in Yahweh forever, for Yahweh is an everlasting rock. For he has humbled the inhabitants of the height, the lofty city.
Oh, I know. There is a false version of a holy city. There is a false council, an infernal council,
Yes.
I call it. And they have claimed a number of mountains, but the primary one is Mount Hermon.
Exactly right. And I think that's who's referred to here. Now, this is a case where the word translated city is actually Kiryat. It's not Ir. So it would not be, you
It
could
would
not
be
substitute
city.
watcher, but it is
Exactly.
the lofty city. But the inhabitants of the height would definitely be, or at least potentially, I think, a reference to the mountain of the gods, Mount Hermon.
Oh, yes, I
Yeah,
think so too.
Or the gods of the mountain, I should say. He lays it low to the ground, casts it to the dust. Now, we have talked elsewhere, and we won't sidetrack here today, but Psalm 68, where we read beginning at verse 15 in Psalm 68, O many peaked mountain, mountain of Bashan, O mountain of God, mountain of Bashan, why do you look with envy, O many peaked mountain, on the mountain that the Lord has picked for himself? And I'm paraphrasing now because I don't have that verse open in front of me, but the verse in Psalm 68 where it says mountain of God is Har Elohim, mountain of the gods. Essentially, Psalm 68 is a polemic against this mountain of the gods, this height on which its inhabitants believed they could challenge Yahweh, God, for his throne. And it's jealous of Zion, the mountain where God has placed his name, where God will dwell forever. I think that's what we're looking at here.
It says here, verse 15, O mountain of God, mountain of Bashan, O many-peaked mountain, mountain of Bashan, why do you look with hatred, O many-peaked mountain, at the mount of God that God has desired for his abode, yes, where Yahweh will dwell forever.
Yes, and then it continues on from there.
It's like a tale of two
mountains. Yeah, yes, the twin, well, not twin towers, but a tale of two. Right.
Well, like in the Lord of the Rings.
Right. Yes, you've got Mount Doom, and then, of course, the mountain where God has chosen to put, where God will dwell forever, being Zion.
Exactly.
So, yes, the mountain of Bashan is Mount Hermon. It's called many-peaked because it's the highest peak in a range of mountains, the anti-Lebanon mountains, which we'll come back to here in just a little bit. We see this when we begin to understand the importance of sacred mountains or mounts of assembly, Mount of the congregation. You'll remember that phrase from Isaiah 14. That's what we think is in view here. He has humbled the inhabitants of the height. We don't think he's talking about the Moabites or the Edomites here. We think this is a reference to supernatural inhabitants of another height. And Psalm 68 goes on to describe how the chariots of God number in the tens of thousands, and he leads captives away in his train. It's describing war in the heavenlies against the inhabitants, the gods of Mount Hermon.
Exactly. You cannot get around the truth that there are small g gods, that there are entities who have claimed they deserve worship, and they are going to be, in fact, they have already been judged. It's just that it hasn't yet, in our time stream, been fulfilled. Yep.
Now I want to skip down to verse 13, because I think that's really the relevant section in Isaiah 26. Isaiah 26, we'll skip down to verse 13, where Isaiah writes, O Yahweh our God, other lords besides you have ruled over us, but your name alone we bring to remembrance. Now we need to remember that Lord is not God's name. God is not God's name.
Right.
It's Yahweh, and that's
it's
why
one of his many names, but the name he gave to Moses is the one he wants us to call him by.
Right. And so when we see the all caps L-O-R-D or G-O-D in the Old Testament, we will say Yahweh just to reemphasize we're talking about this particular entity, the creator.
Yes, and it's often transcribed into English as Jehovah.
Yeah, yeah. And just to remind us that it again is not, that Lord is not his name. That is a title that has been substituted by tradition for his name out of reverence. But we need to understand that when Isaiah says, other lords besides you have ruled over us, let's not get confused about the meaning of that little four-letter word. Verse 14, and this is where we really get into the interesting stuff. Isaiah writes, they are dead, they will not live. They are, English translation, they are shades, they will not arise. But the Hebrew, this is one of those occasions where the word should have been, the proper name should have been used. They are Rephaim, they will not arise. This is prophetic. To that end, you have visited them with destruction and wiped out all remembrance of them. Well, yes, already, but not yet. The Nephilim spirits called Rephaim, not just by the Israelites, but by their Amorite neighbors who venerated them. Those were the spirits of the Nephilim destroyed and wiped out by Noah's flood, but they are the demons that are with us to this day.
Yes.
And that was not just the understanding of the Israelites and Moses and the early church fathers until the time of Augustine. So for 400 years after the crucifixion, almost every early church theologian who wrote about the origin of demons understood that they were the product of the spirits created by the unholy union of the angels of God, the sons of God in Genesis 6, and human women.
So when Jesus cast out demons,
yes,
he was going against the Nephilim.
He was warring with the giants.
Against the giants, yes.
Right. So this is an already but not yet, but there is another prophecy coming that deals with resurrection, and we will get to that after the break.
Oh boy, we've already gone through half of
it. I know. Unraveling Revelation continues right after this.
A child who is trafficked is sexually abused on average 5 to 15 times a day, and only 1% of these crimes are ever reported. This unimaginable darkness must be stopped. And right now, we want to invite you to join us in the fight to end child sex trafficking. Skywatch TV is proud to announce the Silent Cry Help the Children package. When you order the groundbreaking new feature documentary movie Silent Cry from film visionary Josh Peck, you'll learn firsthand from the world's most renowned experts in the fields of trafficking, pedophilia, and Satanism how Hollywood elites are actively engaged in the sexual exploitation of children, why the mainstream media and culture are attempting to normalize pedophilia, why we can't depend on the government to eradicate this ever-present evil, and what the risks are to you, your family members, and communities. Plus, the lead authorities from the Silent Cry movie are back in the never-before-released Covert Investigation on DVD, featuring pivotal, never-before-seen commentaries that couldn't be included in the original Silent Cry film. From cases of demonic possession to satanic perversion, experts on the front lines discuss the worst crimes fathomable being committed against the most innocent amongst us. You'll also receive the brand new MP3 audio series on CD, A Cult of Perversion. In this explosive series, experts like Russ Dizdar, William Ramsey, and others share extremely sensitive research into the most perverse evils plaguing our country now, proving through over 12 hours of content that believers must combat this spiritual malevolence for the sake of our children. This incredible package also includes the never-before-released DVD Fake News or Hidden Truths. Join investigative researcher Stephen Bancars as he guides you through the most current research into the Pizzagate scandal. Finally, the paradigm-shattering audio series by Dr. Thomas Horn himself, The Hidden Occultism of Epstein's Orgy Island. What demonic atrocities were going on at Epstein Island? And who were the high-powered individuals involved in some of the darkest occultic activities the world has ever witnessed? An excess of 500,000 children are being trafficked every single day in our country alone. Now is the time to take action. 100% of the profits from your donation for the Silent Cry Help the Children package goes directly to Whispering Ponies Ranch. The Silent Cry Help the Children package, available now at skywatchtvstore.com. Order now or call 1-844-750-4985.
Welcome back to Unraveling Revelation from Skywatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we pray that the Lord will allow you to go with us to Israel next April 2021. And you can go to Skywatch in Israel to get all the details. But I got to tell you, if you don't go, you are going to wish you had. We have no idea how many more trips we're going to be able to make, not because we're ill, not because we're getting too old, although I'm getting older, I don't know about you, but because we have no idea how much time is left. Jesus is returning soon, and if you want to walk these archaeological sites prior to his second coming, if you want to pray against the demons that the Lord Jesus fought against, if you want to battle giants, go with us to Israel next April.
And we, of course, will walk in the footsteps of Jesus and the prophets and the apostles and see sites like Joshua's altar, Shiloh, and Bethel.
And we'll look over into the Valley of the Rephaim.
Exactly right. And that's in the 4-day extension to Jordan, where we will climb Mount Nebo, which was called the Valley or the Mountain of the Travelers, Mountain of the Avarim. We'll explain the significance of that here in a bit, but you can find out more information online, get a sample itinerary and a breakdown of the costs at skywatchingisrael.com. So we're continuing now with Isaiah 26, where he prophesies, where he writes, "To that end you have visited them, the Rephaim, with destruction, wiped out all remembrance of them. But you have increased the nation, O Yahweh. You have increased the nation. You are glorified. You have enlarged all the borders of the land. O Yahweh."
What verse are you on? Because I'm
verse 15.
looking at the Septuagint.
Now in verse 16, "O Yahweh, in distress they sought you. They poured out a whispered prayer when your discipline was upon them. Like a pregnant woman who writhes and cries out in her pangs when she is near to giving birth, so were we because of you, O Yahweh. We were pregnant, we writhed, but we have given birth to wind." Now the verb there, given birth, is a verb that is yaladnu, and I'm probably mispronouncing it, but I mention that because in verse 19 there's another verb translated give birth, which I disagree with the translators on that one. But here's in verse 18 again, Isaiah 26:18, "We have given birth to wind." So just all of this effort has come to nothing. We have accomplished no deliverance in the earth. And again, we see Yeshua right there. We have accomplished no salvation in the earth, and the inhabitants of the world have not fallen. Now, the verb translated fallen is nephal. It was based on the root word nephal, which many scholars say is the root behind the word Nephilim, the fallen ones. Again, we agree with Dr. Michael Heiser. It's more likely an Aramaic loan word, nephil, which means giant. But I bring this up because in verse 19, we get this verb used in an odd way. Isaiah 26:19, prophetic. Your dead shall live, their bodies shall rise.
Can I stop you for a minute? Because I'm a little puzzled with the pronoun.
Okay.
I love pronouns because they help you to get an idea of exactly what's being discussed. In verse 16, in the ESV, O Yahweh, in distress, they sought you. They poured out a whispered prayer when your discipline was upon them.
Oh, you know what? I jumped right over that.
Like a pregnant woman who writhes and cries out in her pains when she is near to giving birth, so were we because of you, O Yahweh. So who are the we? Are the we the same? Are we suddenly getting a first-person dialogue, a soliloquy from the third-person pronoun, they? Who's talking?
That's a really good question, because the they, it would almost seem that the they, upon whom the discipline of God fell, was the Rephaim.
Yes, because in verse 14, they does refer to the Rephaim.
Yeah, it does seem that, doesn't it? Now, the translators of the New English Translation, whose translation is available on the web for free, along with the translator's notes, which are really helpful because it gives you some insight into the concepts and the words that the translators had to wrestle with. And in some cases, the Hebrew is archaic. In some cases, they're dealing with loan words from other languages, like Akkadian or Egyptian, that they may not be familiar with. So here, the New English Translation translators admit that the meaning of verse 16 is unclear. That's the one with the pronoun they. They uttered incantations because of your discipline.
Yes, let me read the Septuagint. Beginning in verse 14, which we all agree what that means. But the dead shall not see life, neither shall physicians by any means raise them up.
Well, okay, and that's because of the root behind Rephaim meaning
yes, exactly.
to heal. Right.
Therefore thou hast brought wrath upon them and slain them, and hast taken away every male of them. Bring more evils upon them, O Lord. Bring more evils on the glorious ones of the earth.
That sounds like it is a reference to the Rephaim.
Yes, Lord, this is 16. Lord, in affliction, I remembered thee. Thy chastening was to us with small affliction, and as a woman in travail draws nigh to be delivered and cries out in her pain, so have we been to thy beloved. We have conceived, O Lord, because of thy fear, and have been in pain, and have brought forth the breath of thy salvation, which we have wrought upon the earth. We shall not fall, but all that dwell upon the land shall fall. That's entirely different.
It really is.
Let me go on with verse 19 in the Septuagint. Again, this is the Brenton. It's a free translation. From what, 19th century?
Well, let me do the ESV first, because I think it's important to compare the ESV with the Septuagint to show why the Septuagint is the preferred translation here.
I like it. Okay. It helps me to get into the minds of the earlier.
Right. In verse 19, Isaiah writes, Your dead shall live, their bodies shall rise. This is again prophesying resurrection of the faithful. You who dwell in the dust, awake and sing for joy. For your dew, now he's talking to God, your dew is a dew of light. Now here's the final sentence, which I disagree with in the ESV. And the earth will give birth to the dead, to the Rephaim.
Okay.
And the reason I disagree is because the verb give birth is nephal, which when you look at every other occasion that verb is used in the Old Testament means just that. To fall, has fallen, face has fallen, fell down. One time, give birth.
Let me tell you the Septuagint. Verse 18 again. Let me do 18 again. We have conceived, O Lord, because of thy fear, and have been in pain, and have brought forth the breath of thy salvation, which we have wrought upon the earth. We shall not fall, but all that dwell upon the land shall fall. The dead shall rise, and they that are in the tombs shall be raised, and they that are in the earth, they that are in the earth shall rejoice, for the dew from thee is healing to them. But the land of the ungodly shall perish.
Right. The Lexham English Septuagint, which is a more modern English translation of the Greek Septuagint, reads, the land of the impious will fall. Now again, they translated the Hebrew verb naphal, to fall. That's what it means. Again, every other occasion in the Old Testament, that's exactly how it's used. But here, for some reason, English translators get hung up on the references to childbirth in verse 17 and assume that it means the same thing here. They're trying to translate the verse without understanding the cultural context and the spiritual context of the Rephaim to the pagans. So there's a scholar by the name of Brooke W.A. Pearson who argues that the land of the impious or the land of the ungodly is a reference to Tartarus. I would suggest, and again, the Septuagint translators are working with older Hebrew texts that we don't have.
Let me just make this observation. Verse 18 and 19 have parallel phrases.
Yes.
The last phrase of 18, but all that dwell upon the land shall fall. Last phrase of 19, but the land of the ungodly shall perish. They both mean fall.
Yes.
The people will fall, those that dwell on the land, and the land itself gone.
Well, I think it is a reference to those on the earth and those below the earth, because I think if we take the English translation here and translate naphal as to fall as instead of give birth,
right?
The final sentence of Isaiah 26:19 is the land of the Rephaim will fall. So both the world, the natural realm, and the spirit realm, those who have rebelled against God, will be destroyed, while the faithful are raised up at the last
I
trump.
think you're absolutely right, and it goes back to what we discussed last week in the fact that he's going to split the world apart.
Yes.
And he's going to turn things inside out.
And empty out the inhabitants of the earth. Well, this went by a lot faster than we thought. Foolishly, I thought we'd get to some of the other references that I'd already earmarked, like Ezekiel 37 and Psalm 23 and Isaiah 14. We'll get to those next week.
Yes, we will. So read ahead.
This is all about what's going to happen on that day.
And believe it or not, Psalm 23 is in there too.
Yes, yes. So when we are raised up, the ungodly, the Rephaim, will perish. Their land will fall.
Thank you, Lord.
And thank you for watching. This is Unraveling Revelation from Skywatch TV.